Most people have no idea that the United States has quietly stepped back into an engineering world it once decided to leave behind. For nearly 40 years, the country treated large dams like relics of the past, monuments to an era when Americans believed they could sculpt rivers however they pleased and reshape nature with enough concrete and steel. But after decades of saying, "never again," the country is now constructing one of the most important water projects in its modern history. And this isn't happening because politicians suddenly fell in love with mega-projects. It's happening because the American West has reached a point where the conversation is no longer about comfort or convenience. It's about survival. The region is drying so quickly and so dramatically that the systems built in the 20th century simply can't keep up. Today, we're going to walk through how the United States reversed a policy stance that once felt permanent, and why a single reservoir in Colorado has become the symbol of a new era in American water engineering. Before we explore the project itself, it helps to understand the crisis driving it. What's unfolding in the American West isn't the kind of drought you measure by a bad season or two. It's a drought that rewrites the record books. NASA and NOAA now confirm that the region is living through the driest period in more than 1,200 years. 12 centuries. That's not a statistical dip. That is a transformation. Snowpacks that used to act like natural water banks are shrinking year after year. Rainfall patterns are shifting in ways older models never predicted. Temperatures are rising enough to pull moisture out of the ground before it can reach reservoirs, farms, or rivers. And the result is written across the landscapes that once defined America's water confidence. Lake Mead has fallen low enough to expose old boat ramps and skeletons of forgotten structures. Lake Powell reveals canyon walls that haven't seen sunlight since the early 1960s. These reservoirs were built for a world where nature behaved somewhat predictably. That world is gone. And yet, while supply keeps shrinking, demand keeps climbing. Millions of people continue to move into Colorado, California, Arizona, Utah, and Nevada because the West still offers opportunity, lifestyle, and growth. That creates a paradox. The very communities attracting new residents are the ones now struggling to guarantee water. Engineers, city planners, and policymakers spent decades pushing conservation, efficiency, and legal agreements, but none of those efforts were built for a climate changing this fast. Eventually, leaders realized that doing nothing was no longer an option, and that reality opened the door to a technology the country once abandoned: big dams. To really understand why the U.S. circled back to this idea, you only need to look at the Colorado River. For generations, it was the artery that powered the entire Southwest. It supplied more than 40 million people, irrigated vast fields stretching across multiple states, and kept cities like Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Los Angeles alive. Today, that same river no longer reaches the sea. Every drop is spoken for before it even completes its natural journey. Farmers are cutting production because they literally don't have enough water to grow what they've always grown. Small towns have begun rationing. States negotiate emergency deals behind closed doors, trying to avoid a situation where taps go dry in major cities. Climate models once considered extreme are now the baseline. And when a river that once held up a region can no longer perform its job, you have a crisis that demands a scale of intervention large enough to match the problem. This brings us to Chimney Hollow Reservoir, a project tucked into the foothills just west of Loveland, Colorado. If you drove past this valley 20 years ago, you'd never guess it would one day become the centerpiece of the region's water future. Back then, it was nothing but rugged forestland cut by narrow streams, weekend camping territory, wildlife habitat, and the kind of peaceful landscape that rarely makes headlines. But in 2004, Northern Water saw something different. The land had been earmarked for a luxury resort that never happened, and the agency decided to purchase it with a long-term strategy in mind. They understood that the Colorado Front Range was heading toward a breaking point. Without new storage, water shortages weren't a distant possibility, they were inevitable. What followed wasn't a quick process. It took nearly 2 decades of environmental reviews, public hearings, legal battles, redesigns, new modeling, court appeals, and more public hearings. Supporters insisted that without expanded storage, 12 communities along the Front Range would face dangerous shortfalls as climate pressures intensified. Opponents argued that once you flood a valley, you lose something irreplaceable: habitat, forest, and the character of a place that had survived untouched for centuries. These arguments played out again and again. But climate change has a way of shifting debates that once felt endless. Eventually, after almost 20 years of back and forth, construction began. The moment work started, Chimney Hollow became a reminder that the dam-building world of the 21st century is nothing like the dam-building world of the 20th. This is not Hoover Dam. This is not Grand Coulee. Those giants relied on massive concrete walls poured into a canyon until the Colorado River itself bowed to human design. Chimney Hollow uses a completely different philosophy. Instead of a towering concrete monolith, engineers chose a rock-fill embankment design with a specialized watertight core at its center. When complete, the structure stands around 107 meters tall and spans more than a kilometer across the valley. That gives it the ability to hold 1.22 billion cubic meters of water, enough to supply more than 500,000 people for years. For the U.S., which has resisted large dams for decades, this scale is almost unheard of in the modern era. But the engineering story becomes even more interesting when you look at the valley's soil. Most embankment dams rely on clay as a natural seal. Clay expands when wet, contracts when dry, and creates a barrier that keeps water from seeping through the structure. Chimney Hollow had no clay at all. The valley floor offered nothing useful for sealing a reservoir of this size. Engineers had two choices: redesign the entire project into something else, or search the world for solutions used in places with similar geological challenges. They chose the second option. This decision led them to Norway and Sweden, two countries with harsh winters, steep valleys, and dam designs built to survive constant temperature swings. Engineers there had perfected a technique using hydraulic asphalt as a flexible watertight core. It works almost like a living membrane, adapting to temperature changes and slight internal movements while keeping water exactly where it's supposed to be. That idea became the heart of Chimney Hollow's design. Once construction picked up, the valley transformed into a massive earth-moving operation. Crews removed millions of cubic yards of soil and rock to create a strong foundation capable of holding the enormous weight of an embankment dam. They poured a long concrete plinth across the base to form the structure's spine. Then they drilled deep into the bedrock to inject grout, sealing the natural cracks that could later become points of weakness. A custom asphalt mixing plant was built directly on site, designed to produce the exact material needed for the core. Workers heated the asphalt to high temperatures, transported it across the site, and placed it in carefully compacted layers. Each layer was tested repeatedly until the entire core formed a single, continuous barrier. In the world of dam engineering, this kind of precision is non-negotiable. One small flaw can become a major vulnerability decades later. But Chimney Hollow isn't just about the dam itself. The water that fills it travels a route that feels almost impossible when you map it out. It begins high in the Rocky Mountains, on the western side of the Continental Divide, where snowmelt gathers into rivers that naturally flow west toward the Pacific Ocean. Early in the 20th century, Colorado decided that if its population was going to grow on the eastern side of the divide, it needed a way to redirect some of that water. The solution became a series of tunnels and diversion structures, the most famous being the Alva B. Adams Tunnel. This 20-kilometer underground passage cuts through Rocky Mountain National Park, moving water not by gravity alone but through a carefully engineered alignment that pushes it under the mountain range itself. When the water emerges on the eastern side, it enters a sequence of reservoirs and canals that eventually send it toward Chimney Hollow. This entire system works like a mechanical bloodstream. Some of the pipelines along the route are so large you can drive maintenance vehicles inside them. They're reinforced with steel, lined with concrete, and equipped with pressure controls capable of handling the intense forces created when snowmelt surges during peak spring runoff. Engineers monitor the system around the clock. Sensors watch for pressure spikes, temperature changes, flow irregularities, and structural shifts. If something unusual happens, even if it's just a small deviation from normal, the system sends alerts immediately. Moving water uphill or under mountains is never simple. It's a delicate balance of physics, material science, and constant vigilance. And once water enters Chimney Hollow, the work isn't over. Filling a reservoir of this size is a multi-year process. Engineers can't simply open gates and allow the valley to flood. If the reservoir fills too quickly, the pressure on the asphalt core could exceed safe limits. If it fills during the wrong season, the embankment might shift before it settles into long-term stability. So filling cycles are slow, measured, and built into a multi-season timeline. Wet years push the reservoir upward. Dry years allow it to hold steady. The structure is designed to take its time, settling layer by layer, adjusting naturally, and building strength as water levels climb. By the time Chimney Hollow reaches its operational level, it will be more than a reservoir. It will be a data-driven machine. More than 500 sensors are embedded inside its body, monitoring everything from temperature gradients to movement within the embankment. Older dams relied almost entirely on visual inspection, with engineers walking the slopes or checking seepage points by hand. Chimney Hollow rewrites that method. Machine learning models help interpret the sensor data, comparing real-time readings to historical patterns. When something changes, even if it's barely detectable to the human eye, the system flags it early. Drones fly regular survey paths, feeding high-resolution images into software that builds 3D maps of the dam's surface. These maps reveal microscopic shifts long before they become safety concerns. This combination of modern monitoring and traditional engineering is why specialists around the world are studying the project. Countries like Australia, Chile, and South Africa face similar climate pressures. They want to know whether this hybrid approach, part old-school earthwork, part digital infrastructure, can offer a path toward water security in a world where extreme weather is becoming the norm. When you stand at the edge of Chimney Hollow and look across the valley, it's easy to focus only on the engineering, the dam, the rockfill, the rising water. What's harder to see is the cost. Beneath that calm new surface lies an entire valley that once breathed with its own life. Pine forests that shaded migrating elk. Streams that threaded through underbrush untouched for centuries. Quiet places where people camped, hiked, and fished now permanently underwater. This is the environmental side of Chimney Hollow, the part of the story that never shows up in glossy infrastructure brochures. And it's a reminder that every major engineering solution comes with trade-offs. The Big Thompson River, one of the key waterways downstream, could lose up to 20% of its flow in dry years because of the reservoir's operation. Conservation groups sounded the alarm long before construction began. Anglers worried about fish populations. Farmers worried about less water reaching their irrigation gates. Wildlife experts worried about habitat fragmentation. Because of these concerns, Colorado regulators forced the project's developers to build a long-term environmental mitigation plan into its budget. Habitat restoration projects, fish migration improvements, riparian reforestation, all funded as part of the reservoir's existence. Some of the money comes from the Great Outdoors Colorado Lottery Fund, an unusual twist where recreational gaming profits literally flow back into environmental protection. Critics say these measures don't fully replace what's been lost. Supporters argue that while nature pays a price, the human cost of inaction would be even greater. In many ways, this tension sits at the heart of modern infrastructure. It asks people to weigh present needs against long-term environmental memory. And when water security is on the line, the answers rarely fit neatly into moral categories. Yet if you zoom out beyond Colorado, Chimney Hollow becomes part of a much larger question. Are dams part of the future, or just the emergency tools of a stressed nation? For most of the 20th century, America built dams the way it built highways, aggressively, confidently, and with very little hesitation. That era ended abruptly in the 1980s when environmental science matured and the consequences of earlier megaprojects came into clearer focus. Rivers were blocked. Salmon populations collapsed. Wetlands disappeared. Even the ecosystems that remained intact lost their natural seasonal rhythms. By the time nearly 90,000 dams were scattered across the country, public opinion had shifted dramatically. Environmental groups campaigned to halt new construction. Courts sided with them. Politicians, sensing a cultural shift, moved away from the idea of altering rivers on a grand scale. For almost 4 decades, major dam construction essentially stopped. That long pause created the belief that America would never return to building big storage reservoirs. But climate change is forcing conversations no one expected to revisit. Snowpack is shrinking so severely that water managers across the West are losing the natural frozen reservoir that once carried them through dry summers. In places like Arizona and Nevada, demand keeps rising while allocations from the Colorado River keep shrinking. The rainfall the region receives now comes in unpredictable spikes, intense storms followed by long stretches of dryness. Without large storage systems to capture those brief moments of abundance, huge amounts of water rush downstream and used. It's a cruel irony. At the exact moment the West needs more storage flexibility, many of its older dams are struggling with age, sediment buildup, or outdated engineering. That's why Chimney Hollow feels like a turning point. It's not just a reservoir, it's a signal that America is willing to rethink old assumptions. Still, it's important to be clear. Chimney Hollow is not a permanent solution. It does not create new water. It does not fix the Colorado River. What it offers is time. Time for cities to adjust. Time for farmers to modernize irrigation. Time for policymakers to negotiate long-term agreements that reflect the climate of today, not the climate of 1922 when the original Colorado River Compact was signed. In that sense, Chimney Hollow functions almost like a buffer, a piece of infrastructure that absorbs shocks and buys breathing room. And in a rapidly changing climate, breathing room is often the difference between a manageable challenge and a crisis. What makes the project even more interesting is how deeply technology is woven into its operation. Unlike the concrete giants of the past, Chimney Hollow is designed to learn. Its 500-plus internal sensors feed continuous data into a system that builds a baseline for how the dam behaves under various conditions. Over months and years, that baseline becomes more accurate. Machine learning models use it to identify patterns humans would never notice with the naked eye. A slight shift in temperature inside the core, a subtle change in moisture levels, a micro-movement deep within the embankment. These readings can reveal the earliest hints of structural stress long before they escalate into visible problems. Engineers then dispatch teams, adjust monitoring thresholds, or shift water flow patterns as needed. It's predictive maintenance applied to a structure built to last a century. Drones add another layer of intelligence. They trace the same flight paths week after week, capturing high-resolution images of the dam's slopes, crest, and downstream areas. Software turns those images into 3D models that highlight changes over time, small erosion lines, tiny settlement zones, or slight surface deformations that may indicate deeper shifts. What used to require climbing teams and manual inspections now happens through datasets and digital reconstruction. This doesn't eliminate the role of human engineers. It strengthens it. It gives them better tools, better information, and better chances of staying ahead of problems instead of reacting to them. Around the world, this hybrid approach is attracting attention. Water managers from Australia, Chile, and South Africa, all countries fighting their own cycles of drought and extreme weather, have visited Colorado to study the project. They're trying to understand how traditional engineering can merge with smart monitoring to build infrastructure durable enough for the harsh future their climate models predict. In that sense, Chimney Hollow isn't just a local solution. It's a prototype for how nations adapt to a hotter, drier world. Still, America faces a deeper question. How many more projects like this will it need? There are conversations about expanding underground storage by injecting excess water into aquifers during wet years. Some regions are exploring recycled wastewater as a mainstream drinking source, a strategy cities like Los Angeles and San Diego plan to embrace. Desalination plants are also on the table, though their energy demands and environmental footprint make them complicated. And there's a newer idea gaining traction: decentralized water systems where homes and neighborhoods recycle and reuse water internally, reducing the strain on large municipal supplies. These innovations are important, but none of them replace the raw necessity of storing water at scale. When winter snow is disappearing and summer heat is accelerating evaporation, a reservoir becomes more than a lake. It becomes insurance. This is why Chimney Hollow represents a philosophical shift as much as an engineering one. It signals that America is willing to rethink tools it once believed belonged to the past. The country is learning that climate adaptation isn't about choosing between old solutions and new ones. It's about combining them intelligently. Dams alone won't save the West. But without them, the region's vulnerability grows dramatically. The key is building them better than before, with more respect for ecosystems, more reliance on data, and more awareness of how climate extremes can reshape the rules. In the communities that will rely on Chimney Hollow, the reservoir means something practical and immediate. It means water for homes. It means stability for businesses. It means farmers can plan ahead instead of gambling each year on river allocations. For younger families, it means growing up in a place where the taps don't run dry in late August. For city planners, it means one less crisis to juggle in an era filled with them. There's a quiet comfort in knowing a safety net exists behind the hills, even if that safety net took nearly 2 decades of conflict, money, and environmental sacrifice to build. But if you zoom out again, the story becomes broader. It reflects the realities of a century where climate, population growth, and aging infrastructure collide in unpredictable ways. It shows how countries are being forced to revisit ideas they once rejected. It highlights the tension between preservation and survival, between environmental protection and human need. And it proves something else too, that even old technologies can evolve. A dam built in 2025 is not the same creature as a dam built in 1955. The philosophy is different. The materials are different. The monitoring is different. The mindset is different. Chimney Hollow operates not as a blunt instrument but as a precise, adaptable system capable of responding to a changing world. In the end, what makes Chimney Hollow compelling isn't just the engineering or the politics. It's the symbolism. It represents a moment when the United States recognized that the challenges ahead won't be solved by wishful thinking or nostalgia for old policies. They'll be solved by combining innovation with realism, by accepting trade-offs, and by understanding that resilience is a choice. The American West is drying faster than scientists once thought possible. Communities can either adapt with infrastructure that reflects new realities, or they can struggle through a future defined by scarcity. Chimney Hollow doesn't solve everything, but it points toward a future where America takes its water crisis seriously. It shows that even controversial tools have a place when used intelligently. And most importantly, it shows that societies can change course, even after decades of believing they never would. As the water slowly rises behind the dam over the coming years, it represents not just storage but a shift in mindset. A recognition that climate change has already rewritten the rules, and that the only way forward is to build accordingly. That's what makes this reservoir more than concrete, rock, and asphalt. It's a story of adaptation, responsibility, and the engineering creativity required to hold onto water in a world that's losing it. Whether Chimney Hollow becomes a long-term answer or simply buys precious time, one thing is clear. It marks the beginning of a new chapter for America's relationship with its most essential resource.